I don't remember how to do this. Hi, my name is Gabriel, and I need to get rid of a lot of books. If you're new here, I used to make a lot of videos about books, and then I got busy with school, finishing my degree, and starting my career. But I am moving, and I can't take all this stuff with me. I've got an interesting situation set up where I am going to a job in one city that is temporary, and then I am moving to a different city. So I'm figuring out right now like what I want to keep and what I want to put in storage, but I want to get into the habit of like letting things go now. I have a tendency to hoard books because I, like many of you, probably have this grand ambition of one day possessing this like massive home library with just like stacks and stacks of books. And I think that I want to be more realistic about like what books I want to be a part of my life forever, and also like confront what am I actually going to read that I own, like for real. The books that I'm getting rid of are going to be donated to various places, like charity shops or like used bookstores. I want to distribute a lot of them to like little free libraries in my neighborhood. Let's just get into it. Up first, I have Misery by Stephen King. I've never read this. I don't think I ever will. I don't have much interest in Stephen King. Sorry. Next up, I have Life, the Universe, and Everything, and The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, both by Douglas Adams. These are part of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. I think I'm also getting rid of the first book, but it's in some other pile. I'll find it. I liked these. I just read them a long time ago. I'm never going to read them again. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. I love this book, actually, and I own another copy. It's at my parents' house, so that's where this is going. 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I read the first third of this about 4 years ago and liked it, but not enough to finish it. It's really heavy. A big theme of a lot of these books is that they're really heavy. I just don't want to like lug them around anymore. Big Swiss by Jen Bagan. I read this over the spring and did not like it at all. I'm so sorry. Next, I have a manga series gifted to me by a dear friend. Any friends who might be watching this, you might see a book that you gave me. I probably haven't read it. I love you so much. These books are called Toilet Bound Hanako-kun Toilet Bound by Hanako-kun. I just don't think I'm ever going to read these, and I think that somebody out there in the world will really enjoy them. Next, I have The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I have never read this and don't think that I ever will. It's probably beautiful. It's probably amazing. I just wish that I had read it when I was like 12. Next, I have a book called What's Mine and Yours by Naima Koster, which this is actually an advanced reader copy gifted to me by a friend who works at a library. I just have had it for like 4 years and still don't have any interest to check it out. Same with this book, Featherhood by Charlie Gilmore. I don't know what this is. A memoir of two fathers and a magpie. It's another advanced reader copy that I never read. It came out in January of 2021. And the final advanced reader copy is This Other Eden by Paul Harding, who is apparently a winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Good for him. This came out in January of 2023. I'm gonna let it go. Next, I have The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This book rocks. Actually, I'm going to put this in a maybe pile. I really do enjoy this book. I just don't feel as strong of a tie to it as the books on my shelves behind me. And my methodology in going through all of my books is that anything that I wasn't feeling an immediate, like, yes, I must save this feeling for, should probably be released into the world. I think this would be a great book to put in like a little free library around. I like to put books with queer protagonists in those free libraries for the local community to enjoy. Next, I have In the Time of Butterflies by Julia Alvarez. I tried reading this and it's actually, I was enjoying it, I just not enough, you know? So I'm gonna let it go. Next is Luster by Raven Leilani. I read this actually at the beginning of this year and really liked it. It was beautiful. I just am again not as tied to it. I'm feeling very defensive actually now that I'm getting to some books that are actually very good and that I enjoy quite a bit. I just can't take them. You know how like heavy a box of books is and how many of those you have to carry when you move somewhere. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to. And I think that this would also be really enjoyed by somebody else in my community. Same goes for Pure Color by Sheila Heti, a really interesting little novel that I read last summer. I just wasn't obsessed. Next is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I don't know why I had to check her name. This book rocks. Again, it's just very young. I wish that I had read it when I was in high school, and I am going to put it in a little free library so that the young people in my community can read it. The same goes for The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, a beautiful, beautiful book that actually really hurts to say goodbye to. Next is a really, really cute graphic novel called Be Prepared by Vera Broskell, which is about a girl at summer camp. This was also a gift. It's adorable and really lovely, and I'm gonna let it go. Some of those really hurt. Next is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I actually went back and rewatched the first book unhaul video that I ever filmed, and this book was in that video. And when I was giving those books away, I took a hard look at this and I was like, no, I'm really gonna try. And then I didn't. And it's been 3 years. So it's time to just face the facts of who I am and what's just not gonna happen for me, you know? Next, I have The Federalist Papers by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. It doesn't need to be on my shelf anymore. Next is a really heavy book called The Rough Guide to Opera. I have a degree in opera. I don't need this. The same goes for the La Scala Encyclopedia of Opera. I don't need these. They're so big and heavy, and I'm not gonna read them, and they're too ugly to be coffee table books. Then we have Jazz, A History of America's Music. Again, it's too big to actually do any light reading, and if I want to learn about jazz, I'll get something different. Next, I have the Star Wars trilogy, written by George Lucas, of course. These are just novelizations of the movies. They're in these faux leather-bound editions made by Barnes & Noble. I'm just not gonna read these ever, you know? Then I have The Collector's Book of Science Fiction by H.G. Wells. This was a gift, and I'm not gonna read it. A huge pile just fell over. Okay. Next, I have Ward No. 6 and Other Stories by Anton Chekhov. I just really hate these Barnes & Noble Classics editions. I don't know why. I think they're so ugly. I probably should read some Chekhov, but not here, not now. Same goes for this copy of Dubliners by James Joyce. I really should probably read this, actually. I just don't like the edition. That's going to be another theme, is that there's some books that I really, really do want to read. I just hate the edition, and it's the formatting of the thing that has been holding me back from reading it. So this has got to go. Gaston Leroux, The Phantom of the Opera. This copy's just falling apart. I've never read it. I don't think that I ever will. Then I have The Iliad by Homer, another ugly Barnes & Noble Classics edition. This translation is by Ennis Rees. This is actually the only translation of the Iliad that I have read, but last year, I don't know if you can see it, it's way down here under a pile of books. The Emily Wilson translation of the Iliad came out. It's just gorgeous. I love Emily Wilson. Her translation of the Odyssey was very formative for me. So that's the only copy of the Iliad that I need on my bookshelf. 2 Novels and 17 by Kenzaburo Oe. I got this at a thrift store 4 years ago. I tried to read it and wasn't liking it, so goodbye to that. Dune by Frank Herbert. Again, I hate this edition. I probably should read Dune at some point. I really liked the movies. The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. This is actually one of the books that's been on my bookshelf for the longest. I got this as a tiny child and still haven't read it. The Mayor of Casterbridge, another one that's been on there for a long time. This is by Thomas Hardy. I don't want to read that. Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I've tried to read this. I really, really love And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, but this one hasn't called out to me. Even though I did like the movie that came out a few years ago. Next, I have The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I love this book, actually, but I read it this summer in this edition with a translation by John E. Woods, and I got this copy for free. And I don't know who did the translation, but this John E. Woods is the superior, I have heard. And also this copy is just old and falling apart. Next is Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. I don't like this edition. I hate this cover. I've never read this. I really should. I'm saying the same thing about a lot of these. You get it. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, another Barnes & Noble classic edition. I bought this when the Jack Black movie came out as a child. I was like, I want to read that book. And then I never did. Next, I have To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Should I hold on to this? No. I've read it. Release it. Release things that you don't want. Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. I got this because there was like an essay writing competition hosted by the Ayn Rand Society or whatever, where you read one of her books and you write something and maybe you win $1,000 or something. I don't know. I bought this with the intention of reading it and writing about it and never did either of those things. Next, I have this cute little Penguin Classics edition of Circe and the Cyclops by Homer. These are just like a couple chapters of the Odyssey. And it's really cute, but I don't need it. Next is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Again, I want to read this. I just hate this edition. I think it's holding me back. Next, I have Anthropology of Turquoise, Reflections on Desert, Sea, Stone, and Sky by Ellen Malloy. I bought this a long time ago. It seems to be like a very beautiful, powerful memoir full of writing about the desert and color, and I've tried to read it a couple of times and it just hasn't happened, and I don't think it ever will. Next is Fluent Forever by Gabriel Weiner. This was given to me by a friend who wanted to bond with me over our shared love of learning new languages, and I just haven't read it, you know? It's supposed to teach you how to effectively learn a new language without taking a class or anything. It's probably great. Ugh, this is hard, but no, I'm committed. I'm getting rid of it. I'm getting rid of everything. I'm letting it all go. Next is Molto Agitato by Joanna Fielder. This is the mayhem behind the music at the Metropolitan Opera. Joanna Fielder was a former something at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City, and this is her memoir full of a lifetime of crazy stories from the Met. I read parts of it. I thought it was really fun. I just don't see myself really going back and finishing it. Next is Stalking the Nightmare by Harland Ellison. I don't really know what this is, and I've tried to read it. I think it's like short stories, essays kind of thing. It looks really cool. This next one is tough because I stole it from my high school English teacher. It is Into Thin Air by John Krakauer. She gave this to me to read when I was a sophomore in high school, and I just didn't. And I planned on giving it back, but I didn't want to give it back to her until I had read it. And then I graduated into a pandemic also, so there was just no opportunity to like return to the school and admit defeat. And moved, and I brought this with me to college thinking I would read it, and I don't know. Next, I have some books by Immanuel Kant. On the Old Saw. That may be right in theory, but it won't work in practice. And First Introduction to the Critique of Judgment. I'm just not gonna read these. I know myself. I'm sorry. If I really am, like, one day going to, these are very accessible online as PDFs. I don't need them. Next is The Book by Ellen Watts. This was gifted to me by a friend. I read about half of it. It's like philosophy, and I wasn't really obsessed with it, and I'm not gonna finish it. Next is Regarding the Pain of Others by Susan Sontag. This is a book about wartime photography. It's the only Susan Sontag that I have read. I would love to read more of her stuff. But I don't feel like I need to hold on to this one. Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Of course, a book that I want to and should read in my life. But again, this edition, I don't like it. I don't like how tiny it is and how tiny the words are. I'm a simple man. I need big words on a big page. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I love this book. I didn't read this copy. I read a copy in high school. And I don't like this edition. Same with this copy of Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. I also know a translation that I really want to get my hands on, and it's not this. This is a very old one, and it's just falling apart. This next stack that I'm looking at is plays, and those are going to be hard to let go of. But I need to be, like, for real about what I'm going to read and what I want to hang on to. First up is All's Well That Ends Well by William Shakespeare. I actually am currently in the process of reading every Shakespeare play, And I have realized in the process of reading all of his plays that I have a preference for what editions I like to read. That is the Folger editions. And this is the Cambridge University Press. It's just a disaster. I don't like how the text notes are done. They're like at the back of the book. They aren't during the play, which I think is very confusing. I like when the notes are on the same page as the text so that you get little clues about what the hell you're reading. Next is King Lear by William Shakespeare. There's a lot of Shakespeare in this pile. Again, I don't like this edition. I've read this play. Troilus and Cressida, also Shakespeare. This is a Signet Classic edition. I don't like this play. I read it, and I don't like this edition either. Next is the Signet Classic edition of Macbeth, a play which I own in the Folger edition, which is far superior, so I'm going to let this one go. Next, I have 3 plays by Tina Howe. Which I should probably read. I'm going to put this in maybe. Next is A Texas Trilogy by Preston Jones. I've owned this for a long time. I'm never going to read them. I'm sorry. Maybe I will. Maybe I will read them. Maybe I'm wrong. Next are some poems. My Wicked, Wicked Ways by Sandra Cisneros, an author who I really like. I love her book, The House on Mango Street. And I liked these poems a lot. I just want to let somebody else enjoy them. Next is the complete works of William Shakespeare in this tiny, old edition that is so falling apart. Ooh. I do want to own the collected works. This thing is just falling apart. I don't know. It's like kind of beautiful because it survived through all that time. But, you know, I just want to own one that's in better shape and that's really usable. And just because something is old doesn't mean that it is good or worth hanging on to. So I'm going to let that go. The same goes for this bind-up of Henry V, As You Like It, Much Ado About Nothing, and Hamlet. This one does have a publication year, I think. Well, it was presented to BHS by the class of 1913 at Berthoud High School, wherever that is. It's just old, it's in bad shape. I got it at a yard sale. Next is the Complete Stories of Edgar Allan Poe. This is also hard to get rid of. It's a beautiful edition. I actually have read some of them from this copy. It's just big and heavy, and I don't feel drawn to it right now, and Edgar Allan Poe is a very easy author to access if I ever want to go back to him. Next is Russia and the Russians, a History by Geoffrey Hosking. I got this book for free about 7 years ago, and I've always just been intrigued by Russia because I just don't really know what goes on over there, or like what did go on over there in history pre-whatever, the 19th century. And I wanted this to give me a little context, and it probably would. It definitely would. That's the book, you know? This is a parking ticket. A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway, a really beautiful edition, but I don't like hardcovers. This is probably a really easy book to access if I ever do need to read it. I don't know, some of these classics, it's like really embarrassing to admit that I'm getting rid of them, but this is less than half of the books that I own, you know? I do think the mortifying thing about these piles, though, is how many of the books I haven't read. It's just like admission of defeat. Next is a book that, if you know me, is going to shock a lot of you, and I have a reason. Death in Her Hands by Ottessa Moshfegh. Now, the reason I'm getting rid of this is because I was gifted a signed copy of the same edition. It's the hardcover first printing, but signed by Ottessa Moshfegh herself. And while for years I held on to the 2 editions, because I'm just a sentimental person, and this is the copy that I read. I don't need 2 copies of the same book, same edition, especially if one of them is signed and one of them isn't. So, goodbye. Next, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. This is old. I'm not going to read it. It's falling apart. I would feel nervous to pick it up and read it. Heidi by Joanna Spyri. I got this at a yard sale. I don't care. I don't want to read that. The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. Just another old edition that's falling apart. That's interesting. At the front of the book, it says property of, and then no name. I might have written that. I don't know. That's how long I've owned this. Next is To Herland and Beyond, The Life and Work of Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I have read the book Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, also The Yellow Wallpaper, which she's best known for. Those are beautiful. I got this biography of her because I'm very interested in her, but I'm just not going to read it. It's got dust on it. That's how long it's been sitting on my shelf untouched. Next, I've got a bunch of like Barnes & Noble leather-bound editions, the 7 novels of Jules Verne. This is heavy. I don't want to read it. I don't want to lug it around in boxes. The Complete Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Heavy. Do you know how heavy these books are? A biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Heavy. I'm not going to read it. She should have retired. Sorry. Next is a Horizon Caravel book on Leonardo da Vinci. It's full of beautiful printings of his work. It's really pretty. It's really pretty. It's really hard to let go of pretty books, but it must be done. Then I have the complete plays of Gilbert and Sullivan. These are the libretti for their operettas. I don't really like Gilbert and Sullivan, unless somebody wants to hire me to sing some Gilbert and Sullivan, in which case they're my favorite. I've studied them immensely. I even own copies of their libretti. This final stack is going to be really hard. I'm looking at it right now, and it's a lot of books that it's going to really suck to let go of. But it has to be done. Paper Towns by John Green. I loved this book when I was 12. It was amazing. It was everything to me. Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This is easier to let go of because I didn't like the book very much, but it's a really beautiful copy. It's a first edition hardcover. It's gorgeous. I'm gonna let it go. Next is Devil House by John Darnielle. I haven't read this, but I found it at a Goodwill, and I was like, oh my god, John Darnielle from The Mountain Goats. I love that man. I don't know if I love him enough to read his fiction novels. I think I'm going to stick to the music. Landline by Rainbow Rowell. Another book that I really love, but I read it a long time ago, and I don't need it anymore. Ithaca by Claire North. This was gifted to me by a friend. It looks very similar to the Madeline Miller Greek retellings, which I really love. I just don't know if I'm very interested in like somebody else's book that hopped on the trend that Madeline Miller started. But it does look cool. Next is Antkind by Charlie Kaufman. I started this and just wasn't vibing with it at all. I really love the premise, but it just wasn't sitting right with me. So I'm gonna let it go. Next, I have The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is a beautiful book. It was a huge book when it came out in 2020. Everybody was reading it. And I really liked it. I just haven't felt the same like attachment to it as the years have gone on, and I think I'm ready to let somebody else read it. Next is Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. I, again, really love the premise of this, and I read about half of it, and I just wasn't obsessed. But I have friends who really love this book. I'm going to see if anybody that I know wants it. Or maybe I'll try and sell it, who knows. Next is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I like this book. I just wasn't overwhelmed with love for it in the same way that I was when I read Normal People, which, I mean, can anything really touch that? I haven't read Intermezzo yet, but I'm gonna let this one go. It's beautiful. Again, beautiful. Hardcover. First edition. I bought it. I spent like $30 on it. That's what sucks about these hardcovers that are like beautiful and brand new, is that I remember spending like $30. And that's tough. Next is Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. I got this for free somewhere, and I'm just not gonna read it. I think To Kill a Mockingbird is enough. Next I have... this is tough. Next, I have Babel by R.F. Kuang. I loved this book. I thought it was so fun, so high energy. I think that the reason I just am not feeling the need to hold on to it is that, one, I wasn't like obsessed with it in a way where I feel like I'm ever going to reread it. And two, it's just really big and really heavy, and I don't want to lug it around forever. And the final book that I am planning to give away is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This I also got for free. Thankfully, I did not spend $30 on this. I'm still not feeling very called out to it. I know how like hugely popular it is, how many people really love it. I just don't care about video games that much. I know this is a big video game book and that's just not my journey. Maybe I'll eat my words one day and I'll like read it and love it so much and I'll be so mad at myself for giving away this beautiful copy of it, but I don't think that day is going to be very soon. And those are all the books that I am hoping to get rid of. I think going through there were some really tough choices. And I want to try making videos again. I'm not sure how it's going to go because, like, one, I'm just very uncomfortable in front of a camera. I've realized tonight. I'm just very out of practice doing this. And I'm just not trying as hard to keep up with, like, the new releases and really popular authors. Not because I don't want to read them, but because that's expensive. And my philosophy lately has been that, like, most books that I want, if I just wait long enough, they will show up in a Goodwill or a used bookstore somewhere someday. I will find them. I have the rest of my life to find them. And if there's anything that I really, like, immediately need, then it's up to me if I want to, like, request it at the library or shell out my money for it. Whatever. I just want to have a much less materialistic approach to reading. I don't want to, like, hoard and collect and buy as much anymore. We'll see how that goes. Thanks so much for watching.